What in the world is happening in the real estate market really across the entire state here in Alaska, looking at Anchorage, the MatSu Valley, Kenai Peninsula, and Fairbanks? Well, my name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor with the Keller in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, I'm going to be giving you the market update for what's going on across the entire state, looking specifically at the residential market, looking at our biggest local markets for what's going on. So we'll jump into that in just a minute. Before we get started though, do make sure you give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't done so already, so you can receive more market updates like this in the future to keep you updated. And without further ado, let's go and jump in today's analysis. The first thing that I'm going to look at is what's going on in the residential markets here in Anchorage. So there was about 389 properties that were available on the market this time last year. Now it's roughly about the same. I think it's about 382. So not a whole lot of difference one way or the other, but more or less the active inventory in Anchorage is pretty much staying the same. Now the next thing we're seeing is that the number of properties that have actually sold in Anchorage has actually gone down. It was about 371 properties that sold this time last year. Now it's about 302. So not a huge change either way there, but we are starting to see a decrease in the number of properties that have actually sold in Anchorage on the residential side, at least for the previous month. This might not be a trend that continues forward, but that's what we see for the last month we have the most recent up-to-date data for. Now the next thing we see is the average sold price for residential properties in Anchorage went from about $424,000 the year before to about $456,000 the next year. So that's obviously a really aggressive jump. Just if you're looking at the price, there's proportionally, percentage-wise, other markets with much more aggressive jumps, but that's pretty aggressive just for the overall sold price year over date. Let's go and switch gears a little bit and look at the market that's just a little north of Anchorage, and this is the second biggest real estate market in the area, and this is the MatSu Valley. So the MatSu Valley, we're seeing that there was about 340 properties available on the market this time last year. Now there's about 440 properties that are available on the market. So this is significant because we're starting to see a big increase in the amount of inventory that's available. Before we get too excited though, that's not even half of what the market used to be this time this year a couple of years ago. So before we get too excited, yes, it's going up. No, this isn't really a sign of a market collapsing. It's just a sign that things are starting to slowly grind back into more of a balanced market. And not seeing that big shift anytime soon, specifically in the MatSu Valley, but let's see what also we're seeing. Now the next thing we see for residential properties, specifically in the MatSu Valley, is that this time last year, there's about 219 properties that actually sold. Now it's 260. So seeing a pretty healthy increase in the number of properties that have actually sold, which is kind of about what we would expect. We're seeing an increase in the inventory. So that's a good indicator. Last but not least, the average sold price went from about $347,000 this time last year to about $388,000 this year. So that's a pretty sizable increase, as you can imagine there. And to give you some perspective on just how quickly the MatSu Valley's value is going up, let's take a look and see what happened, what its market value was just 2 years ago, and it was actually about $301,000, and it's jumped up over $80,000 over just a couple years. Now, for some markets, that's nothing. When we're looking at a market where we're talking about under $400,000, that's a pretty sizable jump. Probably a big reason for the motivation. What's really driving that is a lot of people moving from Anchorage to the MatSu Valley for the lower cost of living. So that's really one of the bigger driving factors for the MatSu Valley. Let's take a break here real quick. For those of you who've been watching for a little bit, you do know that I host a podcast called the Alaskan Journey Podcast. And that production, I actually do interview people who've recently moved up here or people who've lived up here for a long time and ask for their tips and tricks for, getting up here and then what it's like actually living up here on the last frontier. So it's not just coming from me. So make sure you go check that out. This is something, if you're considering moving up here, and if you are considering getting your house on the market in the near future, do make sure you reach out to me. I do have a seller guide I'd be more than happy to pass off to you, just so you can get a chance to kind of review that. Now, let's go and take a look and see what's going on. And another one of the big markets here in Alaska, which is the Kenai. Now in the Kenai, what we're seeing is that there were about 240 properties available on the market this time last year. Now it's about 230. So starting to see seeing a continuing dip in the inventory available in the Kenai Peninsula. Not for something particularly catastrophic though. This is kind of more of the same for the Kenai Peninsula. Now for the number of properties that have actually sold on the Kenai Peninsula, we see there's been a bit of a dip there. So it went from about 101 properties sold this time last year to 87 this time this year. So we're starting to see a slowdown in the number of properties that are at least closing, at least for that month. We'll see if it continues and becomes a trend, but that's what we see for the most recent month that we have the most updated information. Last but not least, we see that the average sold price for properties in the Kenai Peninsula went from about $311,000 the year before. Now we're seeing the year to date, the average sold price is about $332,000. So that's kind of what we would expect once the inventory is continuing to be so tight down there. That's not a huge increase if you're coming from a pretty expensive market, but for most people in that area, that's they can definitely feel it while they're down there. Kenai Peninsula has a lot of people where they just have secondary homes down there, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger aspect of that market there. Last but not least, let's take a look and see what's going on as far as Fairbanks goes. So Fairbanks has been on the really low end of the active inventory for quite a while now, and looks like that's probably not going to change anytime soon because the number of properties available this time last year was 45, now it's 38. And kind of in communication with people who are in the process of selling properties there, and kind of the word from them is, it's just taking a long time to actually close anything. Like you might have a lot of properties that are under contract, but for whatever reason, they're just taking a long time to actually close. So this doesn't really surprise me. I suspect there's probably more properties that are under contract than these numbers would lead you to believe though. Now the next thing we see is the number of properties closed this time last year was 30. The number of properties that closed this year was 26. So again, I think we probably have more properties under contract than this would lead you to believe, but yes, the number of properties has gone down a little bit. Last but not least, what we see is the average sold price went from about $286,000 the year before, and now it's sitting right about $325,000. So pretty sizable increase, at least for Fairbanks. So what does all this mean as we're moving forward? Are we seeing any kind of a slipping into a crash, recession? I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news if you are really hoping for a crash anytime soon. I don't think that's going to happen. The supply is still just so low in all these markets that I'm just not seeing this big crash that everyone was hoping for. And I know some people have been waiting for years at this point, and those that did when they had the opportunity to buy a couple years ago, probably kicking yourself at this point, because across the board we've seen drastic increases in just a couple of years. The appreciation in the MatSu Valley alone went up about $80,000 in just the course of 2 years. So, best advice I can give you is if you are a homeowner and you're looking at selling, it's take advantage of this right now while we can. I'm not expecting to see the bottom falling out of the market anytime soon, but the longer we wait, the more likely it is we're not going to have as many offers coming in. If you are a home buyer, I really want to advise waiting and seeing if you can get the sellers in that spot, just because interest rates are going up and you're going to have to contend with that. Realistically, this is going to be the cheapest time of the year right now to buy, then it's going to be really for the rest of the year, just because the overall expenses of closing is going to keep going up as those interest rates are increasing. So, on that cheery note, thanks for watching. If you have questions, do make sure you reach out to me down below. I know a lot of this information, it's pretty cut and dry, and it's not supposed to be the end-all be-all. This is really just here to get the discussion going. So, hope this is useful, and we'll see you next time.